If we haven't already said it, I want to say a great big welcome to everybody. If you would, as you get settled in, please update your name to include your location, where you're coming from today. And our topic today, just for a quick overview, our topic is volunteer leadership training. Real quick, by show of hands or with a thumbs up, who would say that you rely to one degree or another on volunteers for your organization to deliver its mission? I know I certainly do. The rest of you, I assume you're here just because it's the most exciting place to be on a Tuesday morning. So real quick, Aaron, let's take a look at the overview, the topic we're going to cover today. And, we've got way more content than what we could possibly cover in 47 minutes. But we're going to start by talking about the leadership mindset, giving some definition to the role. What's this whole thing about obligation, and then 4 top lessons. But with that, we've got a content expert today. Aaron probably won't tell you this about himself, but the hallmark of his success in every leadership role that he has had has been a very effective engagement of volunteers. And so, Aaron, talk to us.
All right. Yeah. Well, before I jump in with a lot of content, I have a question I want everyone to answer in the chat box. And this is a really fun scenario I like to throw out. So would you rather be the backup quarterback for the winning team in the Super Bowl, or would you rather be the starting quarterback for the losing team in the Super Bowl? And here's, some people want the scenario or conditions. If you're the backup quarterback for the winning team in the Super Bowl, you're on the team, you're backup, but you never play a single down in the game, in the Super Bowl. However, if you're the starting quarterback for the losing team, you play every offensive down, but your team doesn't win. So if you had the choice, if the choice was in your hands, throw it in the chat box. What would you choose? A lot of people feel the need to give a disclaimer or an explanation. Here's why I would choose it. Feel free. And just so you know, there's no right or wrong answers, and we're going to come back to this, but go ahead and throw it in the chat box now. What would you choose? I see some starters. I see some backups. Rob said, winner for sure. Detroit Lions if I have the choice. Okay.
Somebody's still stinging from last night's playoff. Sorry.
Yeah, that was a domination. Okay. Wow. Starting, I want to play. Jerry said, I live in Denver. Enough said. Okay. So keep those coming in. Here's where we're going today. When we start talking about volunteer leadership training, we talk about engaging of volunteers. I want us to, first and foremost, the big idea is going to be the emphasis on leadership. We need to emphasize leadership when it comes to volunteer training. And here's why. I don't know why everyone on the call is on the call. What my hope is that you oversee a volunteer team and you have these amazing volunteers. You probably have too many volunteers, and if you were to rate your volunteer leadership, it's like on a 9 out of 10, and you're just hoping to bump it up to a 10. That would be my hope. But my experience tells me that people struggle with volunteers. They don't know how to recruit them. They don't know how to keep them. There's high turnover. Sometimes there's disgruntled volunteers. And it's this aspect of leadership, and especially in the nonprofit world, where it's a necessary evil to have volunteers, but what do we do with them? I'm not sure what to do. And what I see a lot, it seems like the industry standard is you get a volunteer, they show up, they just want to help out. And so you spend about 5 or 10 minutes investing in them, teaching them how to do a task. And then you let them go and they do the task for an hour or for the day, and then they never come back. And it can be really frustrating if you're in this type of scenario. And so what I'm going to suggest is not just investing in volunteers on a task level, but investing in volunteers on a leadership level. And when you invest on a leadership level, you're going to get more engagement, you're going to get more longevity, fewer turnovers in your volunteers, and people are going to love showing up to help the organization fulfill the mission. They're going to feel invested in, and you're not just investing in them with their relationship to your organization, you're investing in them as a person and as a leader, and that's going to bleed into all other aspects of their life. And so I'm going to be building a case on my proposal here, my suggestion. I'm going to give some very details, some tactics on how to do this. I'm going to go over some big picture items, but here's another way to think about it. The essential foundation here is the renter versus owner mentality. If you've ever rented a house and also owned a house, then you have these two experiences, and you know that some renters treat their homes differently than how owners might treat their home. If it starts raining and there's a leak in the roof and you're renting, the renter is going to get on the phone and call the landlord and say, hey, you got a problem over here. I need you to fix it. Maybe they'll put a bucket on the floor to catch the water, but they're going to wait and let someone else figure out the problem. Whereas if you're a homeowner, if you're the owner and your roof starts leaking, of course you're going to put the bucket down, and you might not even have the skills to fix a leaky roof, but you will crawl up in your attic and see, where's the water coming from? You know, can I patch it somehow temporarily? If I'm going to put a bucket, maybe I'll put it on the rafters up in the attic so it doesn't get my ceiling water damage. You're going to go to much greater effort. If you can fix it, you'll fix it. If not, you're going to get on the phone with the repairman and say, hey, I need your help ASAP. Renters and owners act differently. When we just invest in our volunteers on a task level, it's like we're having them be renters. They show up at our organization. They're here to do one task. They might see a problem and they're going to expect someone else to solve that problem. And it's probably going to be a staff person. Whereas if we invest in our volunteers on a leadership level, they're going to act like owners. Sure, they'll be there to do the task, but if they see a problem, they're going to look to be a solution. We're going to empower and equip them to be the solution, to find the solution. They're going to take ownership. They're going to take that initiative, because that's what leaders do. And so we want to invest in our volunteers as leaders. And if this is a new idea, a new concept, you may become a little overwhelmed in today's webinar, but we're going to continue to walk through this and give you some ideas on how to begin. And we're always available to continue the conversation afterwards. So one of the first things that I think are really, really important as a leader of leaders, leader of volunteers, and this gets overlooked all the time too, but defining the roles. Have we put to words, both spoken and written, the different volunteer opportunities, the different leadership opportunities that we have in our organization? Have we written out job descriptions, what, in detail, what those are composed of, the expectations, even the time commitments? When we can start listing these, it allows people to take a glance at the different opportunities and start envisioning themselves in those said opportunities. Now,
so Aaron,
sure.
Aaron, you're talking about kind of some written expectations. That sounds like something you do for an employee, but you're saying do this for volunteers as well.
Yes, very, very similar to like a standard job description, but you want to do it for your volunteer roles as well. Yes, absolutely, 100%. Again, in my own observation, I've shown up to volunteer for different organizations, different places, sometimes alone, sometimes with my kids, and I don't see all the opportunities that are there. And maybe I'm showing up to sort groceries for the food pantry, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with equipping me for that and that alone. But I'm going to go to the next slide, and obviously this is a digital version, but imagine having this on paper, having on something you can give people so they look at it. Maybe I show up to to be the food pantry worker, but all of a sudden now I see there's other opportunities that I may have not even known about. So first of all, this opens up the availability, communicates all the different opportunities that are there. And what does this do? This all of a sudden gives your volunteers some opportunity to be leaders. How so? Well, they might be leaders as in referring their friends. I might go, oh, you know what? My friend Johnny, he's my neighbor. He has a commercial driver's license. He might like to be the food truck driver. Or I might look at this and go, man, my kids, they're all about social media. They are experts. I am not. I'll stick with sorting the groceries in the food pantry. How can I engage my kids? You even see down here, board member. That little seed that you're planting in people's minds, you might have a very capable high-level leader show up to work in the food pantry who would be an outstanding board member. But if they don't even know that's an opportunity, it's not even there, they may never consider that. But all of a sudden you have these listed out in front of people and you're going to start getting their minds moving. And again, if you approach this from a leadership level, hey, you may enter here, but what if we work up in the future to there? It opens up the opportunities. And of course, there's great accountability. There's great clarity when you have the expectations written down. People can look at these and go, okay, I only want to invest an hour a month here. Where do I fit in? It helps them fit in. People may invest an hour a month, and then after a couple months say, you know what? This organization is grabbing my heart. My heartstrings are being plucked here. I want to give more of my time and my energy and my money. How can I engage deeper? And now we've already at least given a picture of what that might look like. So I know this is a bit tactical, but I don't see this as common practice, especially in the nonprofit world. And I think it should be. I think it should be. And so part of what I'm suggesting is building an actual training, building a curriculum to revolve around how you engage your volunteers. And it may take some time and some effort, but I think it'll be worth it, and it'll pay huge dividends. Now, here's another point that I just want to bring up: this question to obligate or not. And if you've been on our webinars before, you've heard us talk about different ways that obligation can serve or hinder us. But I'm suggesting providing a leadership training for volunteers that coincides with some task training as well. But if you have a really strong leadership curriculum that you can take people through, the big question is, are they obligated to serve in your department or in your organization once they complete the leadership training? And a lot of people might look at this and go, wait, this is a 4-series leadership training that you want me to go through, and I'm just wanting to serve in the food pantry, if you will, or fill in your task that you need there. And the answer is yes, we would like you to go through this entire thing. We're going to invest in you as a leader, give you leadership skills and tools that you can use here at the organization and beyond. But what's the catch? So if I go through these 4 sessions, 8 sessions, whatever it is, am I signing my life away? Am I locking it down? And I always like to give the approach, that the hands-off approach. No, you're not obligated at all. And there's a couple reasons for this. Okay, first of all, when we don't have an obligation, I think it does open the door for more people to attend the leadership training. So maybe a woman is attending leadership training. Her husband wasn't planning on serving at the organization, but she might want him just to attend this with her. Now all of a sudden you have another person attending your leadership training who otherwise might not have ever got involved in the first place. So you're getting more people in the door. People aren't feeling like there's any bait and switch, because there's not. They're not committing to anything long term. Second of all, this helps free both you and the attendee if things simply are not a good fit. So if they're, and this happens sometimes, I wouldn't say this is the norm, but sometimes someone gets involved in your volunteer leadership training and they're not a good fit either for your personal team or for your organization. This frees you to help make recommendations to other organizations. You know, if someone shows up to, I don't know, go through leadership training at the animal shelter and they hate animals, it's probably not going to be a good fit in the long run. So you can refer them. Yeah, you can refer them to another organization and say, hey, my buddy Randy, he works at an organization that helps kids get out of trouble by playing soccer. You know, it's a youth outreach. Maybe that's a better fit for you. And we can make referrals recommendation. And again, there's no, you're not making a guarantee and they're not making a guarantee either. And that's, again, sometimes there are those times when it's just not going to be a good fit. You don't want to overcommit yourself or the attendee beforehand. Again, that's not the norm, but there are those times. And so you want to be hands off. And then this also shows a willingness to invest in a person more than just what they're giving you or bringing to the table. So you're investing in people. I would call it like an unconditional investment. If they're able to show up and serve or not, you're still investing them as a person. And that's really big. In fact, I say this, treat volunteers like people before you treat people like volunteers. And sometimes there's a stigma with volunteers that's like, well, they're here giving other free time. I'm going to treat them a certain way. I might treat staff differently because they're on the clock. I have different expectations for them. They're getting paid. You know, a lot of times people don't invest a lot in volunteers because they see the commitment as like, well, they're just giving us something for free, so we're just going to, you know, reciprocate and give them something free. Free doesn't always equate to high value, and we need to see people differently. So before we start thinking of volunteers kind of a, you know, like negative, low level type of position, we need to change our thinking. First of all, treat people as people, but also treat volunteers as high capacity leaders, because that is what they are. And maybe they're not there yet, but that's who they can become. In fact, Kent, you talk a lot about equipping people and expectations there. We were talking about this a little earlier. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so many times I think we make the false assumption, right? So our recommendation, whether it's board members or any other leadership role, here's a place where we really need to make an assumption. And the assumption is we assume that people are not equipped to do a thing unless we have equipped them to do that thing. And so, you know, a lot of my work's in fundraising. We think, well, everybody knows how to do fundraising. Well, I'd say turn that on its head. Let's assume that nobody's equipped to do fundraising unless we have provided that equipping for them.
Yeah. So we want to equip people. So I'm going to transition. I want to give you my top 4 lessons that I like to share in my volunteer training. I have more.
Hey, Aaron,
yes.
One thing before you jump into that, I forgot to mention this earlier, but before we wrap up 47 minutes into this, we're going to give everybody an opportunity just to share one top takeaway. And so be thinking, what's one thing that you feel like you can put to work immediately or within the next 24 hours? We'd love for you to share that with us before we wrap up, but go ahead with your 4 top lessons.
Okay. Yeah. And only feel like you need to share that if you're not driving. I know we got some people on the road, so you guys get a hall pass. Okay, so these are my personal top 4 lessons that I like to share in every volunteer leadership training. Another concept that you'll hear me use a lot of times, we have to use the word volunteer because that kind of gives a description of an unpaid person who shows up to work, essentially to invest in the organization. But I don't like to use that word. I like to call my volunteers leaders. So, but with that being said, the first lesson that I'm always teaching in my volunteer training is a lesson on integrity. And I approach integrity from a couple different vantage points. First of all, the integrity is probably what we're all thinking of. Was it doing the right thing even when no one's watching? I want all my volunteers to have that moral integrity to do the right thing. And I don't think anyone would argue about that. I think moral virtue is lacking in our world today, and I have no problem talking about integrity, always doing the right thing. Not only is this a good personal lesson for everyone in the room, but it also protects the organization from scandals. Things start going sideways when people start forfeiting their integrity for convenience, for money, whatever the case is. So I want people to know that I value integrity, to be a part of the team. We value integrity to protect the organization. Integrity is important. But I also approach integrity from, if you think of like an architecture, engineering use of the word integrity, if a bridge has integrity, we know that we can drive our car across the bridge. It has integrity. It has a strength to hold up our vehicle. If a bridge loses its integrity, like in an earthquake or some disaster, it loses its strength. We wouldn't want to drive our car on a bridge that does not have integrity. And I see the same thing with volunteers. We want our volunteers to have that structural integrity. A lot of times, the work that our volunteers are doing, they show up at our organization and they're pouring themselves out. They're giving of their time and their energy, their resources, their money. And I want to make sure that my leaders have integrity from the time they serve to the next time they serve. Okay, they pour themselves out. What are they doing to get filled back up? And this can be as simple as, are you resting? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you nourishing your body well? Relationally, how's your relationship with your spouse, with your kids, with your family? Are you being filled back up? This could be a spiritual, an emotional aspect as well. But I want my volunteers to be leaders, and leaders are going to pour themselves out. They're going to put other people first. They got to be filled back up in the off time. And so I make sure not only that I teach that, but I also try to do that as well. So I want my leaders to have integrity. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two, teamwork. I want everyone to be a part of the team. We're going to go back to the question we asked earlier. Would you rather be a backup quarterback for the winning team of the Super Bowl or the starting quarterback for the losing team of the Super Bowl? Now, again, there's no right or wrong answers, but there is a lesson here. I'm in Kansas City, so I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. The very first Super Bowl that we won was Super Bowl IV. That was back in the 1969 season. And
how can you remember so far back?
Yeah, I have a great memory from back then. And hey, I'm going to ask a couple questions. Let's do a little football trivia. Throw it in the chat because no one ever gets this. Who was the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl IV 1969 season? I know someone already said go Chiefs. There was a starting quarterback. He wasn't just a starting quarterback. He ended up being the MVP of the game. Randy Kimmel got it. He said Dawson. His first name is Len. Len Dawson. If you're in Kansas City, he's a historical icon. Everyone loves Len Dawson. Okay, so he took us to victory. And until Patrick Mahomes came, he was the only guy that took us to victory. So that's why we love him, because he was the only guy who did it for a long time. Now, and Randy, you don't get to guess this, but can anyone, without Googling,
what do you got, Randy?
Oh, yeah. Can anyone tell me who the backup quarterback Dawson was? So just from your football trivia, no Googling, can you tell me who played backup to Len Dawson? And before I tell you his name, there's an elite group in the NFL of people who have won Super Bowls as a player, as an assistant coach, and as a head coach. Okay, so to win a Super Bowl as a player, assistant coach, and head coach, only two people in the world have ever done that. One guy's name is Mike Ditka. We all know who Mike Ditka is. The Bears, SNL kind of made it popular. If you're not a football fan, he's a household name. But the other guy, he's in this elite group of two people with Mike Ditka, And come to find out, the only Super Bowl he won as a player was Super Bowl IV, Kansas City Chiefs. He was a backup quarterback to Len Dawson. But because he played backup quarterback, he got the ring, he got the victory, he was a part of the team, and now he's in an elite group of 3 people. He went on to win as assistant coach and as a head coach later. His name, and no one's put it in the text box, his name is Tom Flores. Tom Flores. And I think this is a great way to illustrate the value of teamwork. A lot of times, especially with volunteers, there's so much pride in how we serve in the positions that we're in. It's easy to compare and contrast to others, right? Even that list that I put on the screen earlier, we have a food pantry worker at the top and a board member at the bottom. It's easy for one person to look at the other person and go, oh man, that guy must be more important than me. But the truth is, I want the leadership lesson to teach that we are a part of a team. We're all valued the same. We may bring different skill sets to the table, but we all need each other. And with the incomplete team, we're an incomplete organization. A lot of times I'll use the human body as an analogy. We think, oh, the mouth and the head get a lot of attention. They must be the most important. You know, the arms, they're lifting and carrying a lot. They must be the most important. But I can live without my left arm. I can't live without my heart. I can't live without my brain. These internal organs that aren't seen on the outside are just as important as those that do get a lot of attention. And so teamwork, I'm always talking about teamwork, the value of people, regardless. We're not doing a compare game. We're going to bring the skill sets that we have. We're going to bring the energy we have, and it's all pushing the mission forward. Let's be on the same team for each other, not against each other. Okay, enough about that. Next, I do a leadership lesson. I talk about leadership. So it's, leadership lesson on leadership. Maybe it's meta leadership. But yes, I empower leaders. I give them keys to the building, keys to the vehicles, access codes. Of course, there's all the legal stuff that goes with that. You have to have them sign waivers and get on insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you can do this with your volunteers. And that's what I want everyone to walk away with is your volunteer opportunities are probably way bigger than what you're even thinking. So let's think big. You think, oh, I wish I could hire someone to come in and do this. Maybe you don't have the money to hire someone, but you can probably bring in a volunteer who will do it just as well. And in fact, there's this big poster behind me, the different laws of the intentional board, but one of the laws is the law of free labor. Kent, what is the law of free labor in your book, The Intentional Board?
Yeah, so law number 3 says people will work harder for free than they will for pay. And so, I mean, think about it. In fact, I'd love to see in the chat box, what's a role maybe that you did on a volunteer basis that you said, you couldn't pay me to do this. And that's the point. It's amazing the things that people will do that you couldn't pay them to do, but they will step up and do it for free. Quick reference to my own. I worked all night security on the extreme home makeover in February in Oklahoma. You couldn't pay me to do that. And some other time I'll tell you why. But yeah, people work harder for free than they will for pay.
Yeah, and building houses in Tijuana, pajama program coordinator, Randy dressed up as Elvis, and rewrote Grease Lightning for a fundraiser of top donors.
And there's a word picture you can't unsee.
board president at Crisis Pregnancy Center. It's like, Darla, like, you couldn't pay me to do it, but she's doing it for free. Yeah. And so that goes and shows a point. If we expand our thinking, how we approach volunteerism, it's amazing the capacity that people have, and especially, and let's think about, why are people showing up to volunteer in the first place? They either care about the mission, maybe they've been personally impacted by the mission. There's some passion there, and when you unleash that passion, amazing things will get done. I promise you, if you invest in your volunteers as leaders, not just as task fulfillers. Okay, enough on that soapbox. The last lesson I wrote down is transformation story. What is a transformation story? Everyone has a story in their life that goes something like this. This is who I used to be. I went through this transformation. Maybe it was I survived a crisis. Maybe it was I conquered an obstacle. I went through this trial and I came out a different person. Everyone has that story. Do we take the time to listen to those stories? And so that's part of this leadership lesson I do. I want to get to know people, not just know, the basics, but I want to get to know their heart. The transformation story always reveals the heart. So I want to get to know them on a very intimate, on transformation level basis. And then I teach my leaders how to utilize transformation story to cast vision, and how to listen, how to open and listen to other people's transformational stories, because most nonprofits are serving people. There are some that serve animals or some other things, but most of the time we're working with people. We're in the people business, and when we can take time to even stop and listen to someone's transformation story, it's deepening the relationship in between our volunteer and our constituents. And a lot of times, again, with the missions that are represented here on the call today and that we work with, a lot of times the nonprofit is a part of the transformation story, and they're in that middle phase where they're being transformed. And so I equip my leaders to be a part of someone else's transformation story as well. And when you can really, kind of pull down all the walls and say, hey, here's who I am. This is some junk that I've been through that's actually made me to the person I am today. And you can share that with someone and listen to that from someone else. You're gonna get to the heart of the matter, and you're gonna be able to help people. And again, treat people like people, not just like volunteers or constituents. You sit down and listen to people, and there's going to be life change that happens. And I want my leaders to experience life change on their own. I want them to be a part of other people's life change as well. And that's not a task to be fulfilled. That's a person to be led. And again, that's why I fall back on leadership. And guess what? Yeah, I need to teach the food pantry worker where the refrigerated stuff goes and where the dry goods go, and what's first on, first off, and all the inventory and all that. But I need to teach them how to lead people and how to touch the heart before they lend a hand, because that's a transformation that our nonprofit is all about. Yeah, we want to feed people, but we also want to take people to the next level. And so those are just the 4 leadership lessons that I will use in every volunteer leadership training that I do. You can add to it, you can take it away, you can add it your own. Of course, you're going to mix in the task training that goes with the different roles, of course, but let's not neglect investing in people as leaders, because I think there are 2 staff positions in nonprofit organizations that exponentially more than pay for themselves. And one of them is that volunteer coordinator, the volunteer director, because you have one staff person. If they're developing leaders in the volunteer realm, you have one person that's equipping dozens, if not hundreds of leaders. And so it's like, of course, if you can get 50 for the price of one, you should definitely be doing that. The other one is fundraising, which we'll talk about later. But if you invest in your fundraising staff, their return should be a lot more than their cost. That's another day. In fact, that's something that we do. Kent, you want to talk to us about the Asking Academy?
Oh, for sure. And Aaron, you've given us some fantastic content today, and the whole idea of equipping or training volunteer leaders to bring high value to the organization, but really to deliver high value to them. I love the way you've unpacked all that. The primary thing that we do in our organization really revolves around board leadership, staff and volunteer leadership, and then high stakes asking. So we do a lot of work in major capital campaigns. The Asking Academy bridges a lot of territory, and it's a very intense, in-depth 5-month program. What I call the strong leg of the stool is the summit, which is 2 very full days. It's the only part of the program that's actually site specific and time and date specific. And that's the summit, which we've got a summit coming up for the first Asking Academy in 2023. Actually, it's the last day of this month, January 31st and February 1st. So if we should be talking about that, actually we can put that on the screen with those dates. But the Asking Academy Classic, like I said, it's designed for teams, typically 4, 5, or 6 individuals. And you can see not only the upcoming dates, January 31 and February 1, but the next session will summit on April 25 and 26. Registration is open now for that. We do also have a virtual component that we call the Asking Academy Express. This is more designed for individuals, and it's all virtual. We've got a Asking Academy Express coming up next month, January 21 and 22. It's morning sessions on both those days. And what we're primarily doing is equipping volunteers and professionals to dramatically change their fundraising results. So that's the Asking Academy in a nutshell. If you'd like more information, feel free to go to askingacademy.com or reach out to Aaron or me. We'd love to have a further conversation if that's a way that your team could be equipped, should be equipped in terms of building more revenue into your results in 2023 than what you had in 2022.
All right.
Yeah. So what's next? Oh, top takeaway.
Top takeaway.
So we're putting this in the chat box, right?
Yeah, in the chat box.
And by the way, we've had lots of chat responses, introductions, requests for slides, and I'm going to go ahead and put mine in the text box. But mine, Aaron, when you were talking about how every member of the team is an important player, whether they're visible like the quarterback or invisible like the backup quarterback that doesn't even have to step on the field. To me, that's just a huge takeaway. Everybody else, just in a nutshell, what would you say is one takeaway, something that you can put to use immediately? Jerry says, treat volunteers like people before you treat people like volunteers. Yeah, good stuff. Megan, empowering volunteers through training and a written job description. Yeah, excellent. Let's see. Kevin says, man, it's going by so fast, can't even catch up with it. The reminder to have a written job description for volunteers. Yeah. Clear expectations. You bet. It's a great reminder. Randy, treating volunteers as people. Well, it looks like a lot of people like the job description thing. Lori says the renter versus owner mentality. Yeah. Really strong point. Thanks for introducing that, Aaron and Lisa, for emphasizing it. And then as you're doing that,
let's
ahead,
do
Aaron.
some. I was gonna say, let's do some Q&A, question and answer, or Q&R, question and response. We don't have all the answers, but we can at least give a response or find the answer. But
good point.
Feel any questions on anything, it conceptually, or if you have a question down to, hey, nitty gritty, this is the situation I'm working with in my organization. What do you suggest? Or I'm hitting a roadblock here. Feel free to drop those in and we'll address as many of those as we can.
Right. And if you have hard questions, difficult issues, Aaron will be glad to address those. Any balls, toss in my direction.
Yeah. And as you're writing those, I'll even address, Lori mentioned as a top takeaway, the renter versus owner mentality. A lot of leaders, staff people are scared of the vulnerability of letting a volunteer be an owner instead of a renter, because there is some vulnerability there, right? You're delegating. Sometimes literally you're giving away the keys to the building. You're giving a security code to disarm the security system. So people might be there when you as a staff person may not be there. There are some, you'll have to talk to your lawyer. There are some legal steps that you need to take beforehand, background checks or disclaimers or privacy policies that you need to do. But man, when you enable people to be owners versus renters, it really does take your organization to the next level. And I'll say this too, you have just the same amount of risk with a staff person as you do with a volunteer. And we've seen lots of scandals and bad things happen with staff people. So I wouldn't let that fear control you or prohibit you from investing in your volunteers as leaders.
And let's see, Kevin raised a question here, brief thoughts, the difference between nonprofit versus profit boards and the issues of accountability for results. So, I mean, we could do a whole session, Kevin, on the differences between the two kinds of structures. But in terms of the board level accountability for results, the issues are the same. The specifics may be different, but the key thing I would say twofold. Number one, that if there's no accountability, that's just another way of saying nothing matters, right? And at the governance level, it matters regardless of whether it's profit driven or purpose driven. And the other thing I would say is the importance of there being the clear written expectations. If the expectation isn't in writing, it doesn't exist. And if it's not monitored or enforced, it doesn't matter. And so, again, I would just say, yeah, there's some specific nuances. And the other piece I wanted to address is just that whole thing of equipping. We have the assumption that just because somebody is chosen, that they're qualified and prepared. And in my experience, that's going to lead to disappointment. And so, again, I'd say the same thing. Let's assume that nobody's equipped to do a thing unless we have provided that equipping. Maybe oversimplification, but we're going to end up better being oversimplified than being presumptuous about it. Great question. Thanks, Kevin. Anybody else have one? I know we've got just a couple more things to touch base on before we wrap up. Let's see. Lisa's got a question here. Major roadblock is keeping volunteers engaged when I do not have current needs, constantly recruiting, training, and replacing. Aaron, what's your thought?
I've only been in that situation a very few times because I've almost always had need. So I'm guessing maybe there's some ebb and flows with your volunteer needs. So I would say a couple things. One, just being upfront and clear about that with your volunteers on the initial training piece, the onboarding, I think will be huge, because if the leader understands that, and again, I would assume domestic violence volunteer coordinator, that's not stuff that's planned. You know, my background is I worked with middle school and high school students, and so school semesters and summer breaks I could foresee coming and adjust accordingly, whereas this you can't. So that'll probably be always a challenge on some level. But the more your volunteers understand the ebbs and flows, and you just need, you know, you're going to need to make some last minute requests for, hey, I need a volunteer leader right now, or, you know, within the next 24 hours, whatever your time frame is. The more they understand that, and how connecting that with the mission, always fall back to the mission. To fulfill the mission, I'm going to need some people to be responsive, is going to be huge. And again, there will be some people who can respond like that. There will be some people who can never respond like that. Going back to some of those job descriptions and expectations, you know, hey, if you can, you know, if you can show up at 10 p.m. at night to help, you know, induct someone into our facility or whatever. Some people can do that. New parents probably can't. They probably just can't leave. Single parents also, they can't just leave kids at home, you know, in the late evening. But parents of older kids, or people who don't have kids, you know, different life scenarios and situations may lend themselves more to that. So covering that up front and knowing what you're looking for and helping people align themselves to those will help as well.
Good tips, Aaron. Hey, we've got about a minute and a half left. What else do we need to hear or say before we wrap up?
So next month's webinar, we're actually doing 47-minute on exploring the Asking Academy. We talk about it almost every webinar. You guys probably get emails from us or see it on LinkedIn, but a lot of people don't understand what it is, the value behind it, why we do it. And so we're going to just take some time unpacking that. We're going to have some people who've been through the Asking Academy join us and give their perspective. But going back to leadership training, if you're investing in your volunteers as leaders, there still is the task or the skill of your mission that you need to do. And the Asking Academy is a way that we can come alongside you and help teach major gift fundraising to your volunteers, to your staff, to your board. And so there's a lot of overlap here. So definitely want to invite you guys to that next week, February 14th, or sorry, next month, not next week, next month. Valentine's Day, think Valentine's Day. This is one of the most romantic things you can do for your nonprofit.
There you go.
Hey, come 4 or 5 o'clock p.m., then you can clock out and do other romantic things for your lover. But you probably still got to work that day. So we're going to set you up for success. How about that?
Awesome.
And oh man, it's 10:47, so I'll go to the next slide. Want to say a big thank you for your kind attention. And man, we wish you the best as you invest in your volunteers as leaders. If anyone ever just wants to talk shop, talk ideas, I'm available. Kent's available. Shoot us a message, shoot us an email. But we want to see you succeed. And we love when volunteers are fulfilling their greatest passion in life through serving at your nonprofit. So we want to see that happen as well. Any final words, Kent?
Nope. Thanks for showing up. Can't wait to see you next month on Valentine's Day.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you then.